story.
It is nighttime. Daddy Pig is reading Peppa and George a bedtime story.
Once upon a time, there was a shepherd named Gyge. He lived a quiet life, tending to his sheep in the hills and valleys. But one day, something extraordinary happened.
Gyge was just going about his day, watching his flock, when he stumbled upon a hidden cave. Inside the cave, he found something mysterious. In the dark, dusty cave, Gyge saw a glittering ring lying on the ground. It looked old, but something about it felt magical. He slipped the ring onto his finger, and poof!
To his surprise, Gyge had vanished. The ring made him completely invisible. He was amazed. He could go anywhere, do anything, and no one would know he was there. At first, it seemed like the most incredible discovery.
But then, Gyge began to wonder, what could he do with such a powerful ring? He realized he could take things that didn't belong to him, and no one would ever catch him. He could make himself rich and powerful, and no one would know.
Gyge thought about all the things he could get away with, and so he started using the ring for selfish reasons, to take and control what wasn't his.
But here's the thing, just because no one could see him, does that make what he did right?
It's tricky, isn't it? Having a magic ring might make someone feel powerful, but it's important to remember what's fair and kind.
Exactly. You see, the real question of this story is, what kind of person are we when no one is watching? Even when we can get away with something, should we continue to do it?
It's about choosing to do the right thing, even when we're alone, because being good isn't about who's watching, it's about what's in our hearts.
And so, in this story, we can learn that power, like the magic of the ring, can be dangerous if used selfishly. The greatest strength of all is making the choice to be kind and honest, even when no one is there to see.
Good night, my little piggies.
Today, we'll be discussing Plato's story of the Ring of Gyges and how it raises profound questions about justice, morality, and human nature.
Let's start with the story itself. Plato presents the tale of Gyges, a shepherd who stumbles upon a magical ring that grants him invisibility. This ring allows him to act without fear of consequence.
And here's where Plato begins to explore a controversial idea. Justice isn't something people pursue because they value it. Instead, Plato argues that justice is a social construct, a kind of mutual agreement between individuals who fear suffering from others' injustices. This means that people are only just because they're afraid of being caught.
Right. In Plato's views, laws and societal norms are created to protect people from harm, but they don't make people inherently just. If someone had the power to escape these consequences, like Gyges with his ring, they would abandon justice entirely. The idea is that individuals act justly because they fear punishment, not because they believe justice is inherently good.
This is really important because it challenges the idea of justice as an innate virtue. According to Plato, justice is a compromise, a way for people to avoid the worst-case scenario of suffering from others' injustices without being able to retaliate.
So the story is Plato's way of asking us, if we could get away with injustice, would we still choose to be just? According to Plato, the answer is no. Gyge's invisibility ring allows him to escape all forms of social accountability. And as soon as he realizes that he abandons justice entirely, his actions, murdering the king, taking the throne, are proof that, when given the chance, individuals prioritize their own desires over morality.
So, Plato is suggesting that justice is a social agreement, not an innate moral quality. People act justly because they have to, not because they want to. It's a very cynical view of human nature, but one that forces us to think deeply about why we value justice in the first place. Now let's move to the next theme, the corrupting influence of power. The ring of Gyges is a symbol of absolute, unchecked power. It allows him to act without fear of consequences. No one can see him, and no one can hold him accountable.
And what does Gyges do with his power? He uses the ring to seduce the queen, murder the king, and take control of the kingdom. The ring essentially corrupts him because it frees him from the societal norms and consequences that would otherwise guide his behavior.
In our world, we see many examples where individuals or institutions act unjustly because they are beyond accountability. Think about political corruption, corporate scandals, or even misuse of power in public office. Without proper checks and balances, power often leads to moral corruption.
Plato's message here is simple, but powerful. When people gain the ability to act without consequence, they often abandon ethical considerations. Power, when unchecked, corrupts the individual, and that's what happens to Gyges.
Let's dive deeper into what this story says about human nature and morality. Plato raises the fundamental question: are people naturally just, or do they only act justly because they have to?
According to Plato, the story of Gyges suggests that humans are not naturally just. In fact, people only act justly because they fear punishment. Given the chance to do whatever they want, as Gyges does with the ring, they would prioritize their own desires over ethical behavior.
This touches on the relationship between desire and ethics. The ring allows Gyges to pursue his deepest desires without worrying about societal judgment or consequences. And without those societal constraints, his desires overpower any sense of justice.
This also leads to a bigger question about human nature. Are we inherently selfish? Plato suggests that morality is more about societal pressure than an internal sense of goodness. Without that pressure, our true nature, selfishness and desire, would take over.
Finally, Plato explores a radical idea about justice in the unjust life. Plato argues that an unjust person who appears just will live a better life than a truly just person who is wrongly perceived as unjust.
Exactly. The unjust person, by manipulating appearances, can gain wealth, power, and influence. They can rise to high positions and enjoy all the benefits of being perceived as a good person, even though they act unjustly in private.
Meanwhile, the truly just person who is mistakenly seen as unjust will suffer. They will be punished, shamed, and ridiculed, even though they are morally upright. This is Plato's way of challenging the idea that justice always leads to a better life.
Plato's point is that people care more about their reputation than about being truly just. Even the gods, he suggests, might favor the unjust person because they can offer greater sacrifices and honor them better than the poor, suffering the just person.
It's a provocative argument, one that makes us question whether it's better to seem just rather than to actually be just. Plato is challenging us to think about the nature of justice and whether it's really about doing what's right or just appearing to do so.
In conclusion, Plato's Ring of Gyges presents a complex view of justice, power, and human nature. It forces us to consider whether justice is something we truly value or just a social agreement we follow out of fear.
It also shows how power can corrupt individuals when they are freed from accountability, and how human desires can often override ethical considerations.
And with that, we leave you with Plato's enduring question: if you had the power to act without consequence, what would you do?